5 years ago today, Paul George was traded from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the LA Clippers in a sign and trade. And 5 years later, Paul George has left the Clippers to join the Philadelphia 76ers. And we wanted to revisit the trade and kind of discuss the pieces that went out um, to the Thunder and what those pieces have become since part of it was draft assets, obviously. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven draft assets, including picks and swaps, along with Danilo Gallinari, an expiring contract, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for Paul George. Obviously, the deal was to get Paul George and Kawhi indirectly, but nonetheless, that is what it is on paper. Any place you guys want to start with?
Can you guys remember when you first heard this trade 5 years ago? I can.
I can as well.
I can vaguely remember it, so you guys can start with yours.
Okay. I remember being absolutely heartbroken because Paul George is my favorite player on the Thunder. I was like torn between my fandom. I was like, do I follow the Clippers or do I stay with the Thunder? Ended up going to the Rockets that season. But anyhow, we don't talk about that. Alex, do you?
Yeah, I opened up my phone and saw the Woj tweet. Paul George is leaving the Oklahoma City Thunder for an historic amount of draft capital and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Danilo Gallinari. And I was like, man, I wish they would have run it back. I feel like they could have done it. So it only like made me feel more negative at the time. But then I don't know, after thinking about like 3 to 4 minutes, just sitting in the car, I was like, hey, you know what? Long-term wise, this is not that bad for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They get quite a lot of assets and a promising young player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And
Yeah,
yeah, here I know.
yeah, my takeaway was again, I don't remember if I saw the trade like right before I slept or if I woke up and saw it, but it was like 2:30 2:30 in the morning right when I was about to sleep or right when I woke up. My initial reaction was just like shock. I knew this had to happen though, like deep down. This team lost back-to-back years in the first round, deep in the luxury tax. It doesn't really make sense, but it just hurt. And honestly, I was more sad that this meant that Russell Westbrook was going to be traded and that this team was going into a rebuild. Like I was just like, dang, I'm gonna have to watch trash basketball for the next like 4 years and hope that these lottery picks hit and stuff like that. I was more so going through like those emotions. Strictly of the trade, I wasn't too mad about it. I didn't really hate the Clippers that much. Like they were a little bit of villains in my eyes, but I didn't have like strong resentment towards Paul George or anything like that. I was just like, yeah, you know what? Thanks for re-signing with us in the first place. This is kind of what needed to happen. And then once I got over those emotions, I was like, Shay, okay, cool young player. We'll see what happens there. And a bunch of picks. I was like, okay, nice. We can do something with that. But I was just annoyed. Like 2023, that's so far away. Like, who's gonna wait until then? But here we are, and I'm happy that I did wait through all that.
Yeah. I remember when I went through, I was like, oh my God, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are going to be on the same team together. It's like this is like top two MVP candidate Paul George and Finals MVP Kawhi Leonard. I'm like, this is the greatest team of all time. Like, this is the best duo we've ever seen. This was the 2019-2020 season where it was all the duos. It's like AD, LeBron, Westbrook, and Harden, all this. So yeah, it was a definitely an era. But like, Skate, I'm so happy to have been in this, have gone through that as kind of maybe as a Thunder fan and finally be in this position.
Yeah, exactly. Big time. I stick through with the Thunder. I was tempted to jump ship, but I never had like a strong emotional attachment to Paul George specifically. Like even when the Thunder got Paul George, I remember thinking like this is basically Russ and KD, except instead of KD, you have someone who's worse than KD. So I was just like skeptical on the ceiling. Like I had to do some delusional fan thinking to kind of sell myself on that team. But it was a fun 2 years, and then you get this huge trade haul. Speaking of the haul, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, we'll start with him. His first season with the Thunder, he jumped up almost like double in points per game compared to his rookie year where he averaged around 10. He put up 19 points from 10.8 points, finished sixth in most improved player. The next year was when things really got rough and the Thunder went through their tough rebuild. Shea jumped up to 23.7 points per game. Had a nice season, only played like half the year in a shortened season, so only like 35 games total. The next season, he's had a struggle at the start of the season and then found his groove, finished with about 24 and a half points, slowly getting better. And then the real leap happened, the all-star leap for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the superstar leap, you can call it. He jumped up to 31.4 points, 5.5 rebounds, 4.8 or 5.5 assists, 4.8 rebounds, couple steals, a block per game, just really efficient basketball from Shai. And then he managed to get even better in this season that just passed right now. And he led the Thunder to the second round of the playoffs, youngest number one seed, youngest team to ever win a playoff series. And now the Thunder are kind of like gearing up for a big run in these upcoming years. So what did you think of Shai at the start of the trade, and what do you think of him now as a player?
Yeah. Obviously at the start of the trade, I was more like, hey, cool, we get a young, promising player back in return. I've seen him play against the Warriors in the playoffs. I remember watching that game back, that legendary comeback, um, like 34-point comeback against the Warriors. He was incredible in that game, and I started to look up a bit more of his past games with the Clippers, and I was like, hey, that player is not that bad. Like he's very good at that driving game. And now we're here, like 5 years later, and he is arguably the best two-way guard in the league right now. Like his scoring has developed by so much. He's become probably the best mid-range player in the league uh, right now. Arguably has the best handles in the game right now. Um, though probably fans are probably going to say something else. But for me, he has the best handles in the game. Um, Still incredible at driving, leads the league by drives for like 4 years in a row now, I think it is. So on that part alone, if you would have told me that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was going to be like a generational player that OKC would have gotten back in return and nothing else, I would have said, all right, that's not a bad deal. I'll take that. But now we also know that they still got 5 first-round picks, 2 pick swaps out of that. So it's even better for me, really. It just sweetens it by so much more.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask you guys was, looking back, would you have done that trade straight up for Shea?
I mean, knowing what Shea has become or not knowing, like what do you mean?
With hindsight.
Oh, with hindsight, yes, easily. Honestly, Clippers wouldn't even do that trade, but I would 110% do that trade for just Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, let alone all the draft picks, which we're gonna get into in a second. Alex, what about you?
Yeah. I think also the same. Though I think the Clippers probably would have thought that maybe they'll still do that because Paul George at the time was an MVP caliber player, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like in hindsight, you'd have to wait 5 years for him to be an MVP caliber player. So when you want to go win now, I think you still do that trade in that regard. Paul George will Shai Gilgeous-Alexander straight up. I think that still would have been the move at the time. Um, so I'm pretty sure the Clippers probably wouldn't have done the picks back then, obviously.
Interesting. And I think before we touch on the picks, I remember being so excited to grab Danilo Gallinari. He was actually the leading scorer at 90 points per game in the 20, no, 1920 season. Really nice pickup. Like you haven't really seen a game like that in a while. Kind of that kind of stretch four that shoots like long twos but highly efficiently. He used to run stuff like he was just a very versatile player to have. Obviously, he's a kind of a rough end to his career following that season, but that was his peak. So I was even excited just to get him initially, and you have no idea what these picks can be, but we're at least halfway through knowing what those are if we want to move on to them.
Yeah, for sure. Danilo was great. We Everyone kind of knew the deal where he's just like, an expiring contract. He's gonna have 1 year. Maybe the Thunder would have traded him in the deadline if they weren't playing good. They were playing good entering the deadline, so they just kept him. And it is what it is. Like sometimes you lose someone for nothing and it's not the end of the world kind of thing. It's just like it is what it is. It's the right time to part ways. Getting to the picks, the very first one was a Miami Heat 2021 unprotected first rounder. That ended up being the 18th pick. And with that pick, the Thunder took Trey Mann. Trey Mann played 3 seasons with the Thunder. He struggled to find minutes on the court, explosive guard, shot creator. Um, and then he was traded to the Hornets as part of a bigger deal that brought in Gordon Hayward, which was to help the Thunder get even more salary cap this offseason and to gamble on Gordon Hayward. The trade didn't work out, but nonetheless, Trey Mann seems to at least be an NBA rotation level guard for the Charlotte Hornets now after being traded. So, any thoughts on Trey Mann?
It's actually kind of funny to think about, but kind of in hindsight now, Trey Mann leads the Thunder to acquiring Isaiah Hartenstein because when you think about it, like really, him, Vasilij Micic, and who was the other player that went in the trade
Bertans.
out? Bertans, true. Like those three players acquire you Gordon Hayward, and with that, for the upcoming offseason, you get 18 million cap space open, and that extra 18 million allows you to acquire Isaiah Hartenstein for the next 3 years, who is pretty much fitting the fitting or best acquiring free agent OKC ever would have gotten or has ever gotten throughout their existence. So I'm very thankful uh, in that regard, but it still hurts to lose Trey Mann. Back at the time when they drafted him and Giddy, I was like, man, you get the best playmaker and the best shot creator in the draft, and then they're going to learn from the best driving finisher and the best on-ball defender in the league, and then like everyone is learning from one another, chopping the iron, stuff like that, and everyone is going to become like a two-way menace. Obviously, that didn't quite happen at the time. I mean, for one player, it did happen, kind of. For the rest, not so much. Um, but Trey Mann was always a great guy, always one of the funnier guys. I think it's always been said on the team. Pretty sure Aaron Wiggins was the most devastated to lose Trey Mann, as he was like his best friend on the team last season. Um, but overall, it's still like in hindsight, like I said, without Trey Mann, you don't get Isaiah Hartenstein. So I'm happy.
Yep. And you also still get some of the moments, like the poster in Summer League, when he hit a ridiculous quarter against Boston, a lot of snatchbacks. Obviously he's not a guy you get a direct kind of current impact from, but obviously you would have got impact from him during that season, like that he was productive. So I was not the biggest fan. I think you guys will maybe remember this, but it was still good to have him on the team. And as I said, it leads to further deals down the line.
Yep, exactly. And moving on, 2022 Clippers unprotected first rounder. That was the next draft pick traded. That pick ended up becoming Jalen Williams, uh, from Santa Clara, the good Jalen Williams, quote unquote, even though both are good. This one is the real fish because the Thunder basically got their third, second, one of the two best players with that asset, an absolute home run in the draft. This guy looks like a superstar. He had a great playoff run. He finished a little bit tough, but overall had a good playoff run, had a great season. He's looking like he's going to get a max contract extension in about a year. Yeah, that's Jalen Williams. So what did you guys think of that pick? Because that's one of the biggest assets the Thunder got.
I mean, I'm thinking about that question I just asked about Shea. Would you do that straight up? I don't think it's as a yes. Maybe in a couple of years, we talk about this in the future where he's hopefully going out to be a superstar. But this is like if you get a guy that's going to be able to be a strong piece to compete and be a scorer in the fourth quarter, able to be defensive versatility on the floor, just kind of the Paul George type. In some regards, you can kind of see some similarities maybe in like the early Indiana kind of years, a bit of shot creation, a bit of height. Definitely different players altogether, but it's also this pick allowed them to get Usman Jang. Because when you have like consecutive draft picks, you can choose the order in that scenario. But I think that's obviously the best pickup in terms of use of picks that the Clippers have given us since then. And it kind of makes up for Danilo Gallinari having left just after 1 year on an expiring contract.
Yeah. I remember that season vividly at the end because that's when we all really got to know each other, basically. Like we were all kind of integrated to the Thunder community back then. And it was so funny because I remember that playing game against the Pelicans so well. Like I watched it back and I was really hoping that the Pelicans would help us let the Clippers drop into the lottery so that we could potentially increase our odds of acquiring the number one draft pick through the lottery. And man, like that day before the playing game, like it was pure magic back then. Like everyone was like saying, okay, you're New Orleans Pelicans fan number one, you're number three, 17, 51. Everyone had their Pelicans hats on their profile pictures. Like that was an incredible day on Thunder Twitter. Uh, for everyone remembering it. Such a great memory, one of my favorite memories. Um, Probably the biggest hate watch in the history of the Oklahoma City Thunder Twitter community. um, and then you got Jalen Williams at 12. At the time, he was the riser on the board. Um, Arguably, at the time, a lottery talent with the rise he had. I was still a little bit surprised that they took him, but like overall, his productiveness, it made sense. His overall wingspan compared to his body is absurd. And remembering like salty Clippers fans at the draft saying, "Man, they're going to draft like the next Kobe," and like guessing it up the pick, and it's only going to be another role player. And then yeah, Jalen Williams really just became the second to third best guy on the Thunder, like second leading scorer. Um, so it's incredible.
Yeah, that's a very underrated point you mentioned because everyone was super hyped when the Clippers lost. Thunder get a lottery pick. It becomes the 12th pick. They pick Jalen Williams. And then what Jalen Williams actually becoming this level of player because we were just happy we got a lottery pick at first. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy to me how happy everyone was with that. The next asset was a 2023 first round swap with the Clippers. The Thunder ended up with the 12th pick, and the Clippers made the playoffs, so the swap didn't happen that year. And the next asset, which is the only asset we actually know what it is now, is a 2024 Clippers unprotected first rounder. Wait. That what did that pick end up becoming? Hold up.
That's
That
Topic, no?
became, I think that became the 2027 Clippers pick swap.
Yes. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for correcting me. That they ended up making a trade with the Clippers to move that pick to 2027. So now the Thunder have a 2027 swap with the Clippers, but it was originally supposed to be a 2024 first rounder. So yeah, that is all the assets we know about. The remaining assets are Heat's 2025 protected first rounder. I think they amended that pick, but the Thunder still own it. The right for the first round swap with the Clippers in 2025, 2026 unprotected first rounder, and then a 2027 swap, like we just mentioned. So the Thunder
Yeah.
have potentially four more picks coming down the line. I don't think all of them will convey, but at least some of them will, and you can do stuff with that. And just the fact that the Clippers lost Paul George now makes it tough. I think they're going to be aggressive to be just good enough to where these picks aren't as juicy, but what do you think is going to happen in the Clippers' future, Matt?
Obviously, with that swap that we just mentioned in the trade, the Thunder were betting against them being worse in the future. Obviously, losing a guy that you traded half your draft capital for over the next like 5 years, they're going to get some of that back now after 5 years because you can only trade up to 7 years in advance. It's just wow. Uh, just with this team, after losing a guy, you basically got a 5 year rental. Obviously, that's the kind of chance, and we can kind of go through very briefly on where the Clippers managed to get to in each season. I think they made the playoffs 4 out of the 5 in general, but that's not really what you look for when you trade away a young star, an expiring contract, and so much draft capital. But, I just don't see them contending the following year. They had a really good regular season. They were a lot more of a threat last year, but to come away with a first round exit after the end of your 5 year rental is just not a good look.
Yep, it is very tough. And it's also weird, right? It doesn't exactly feel like it's been 5 years of Paul George on the Clippers. It feels a lot less. And a big reason why is because of injuries, because a lot of years it's just uh Kawhi's hurt, Paul George is hurt, something like that, something comes up, and they just aren't able to go deep. Like if you look at it, they only had one healthy playoff run, and that was their very first playoff run. Besides that, injuries have taken over. I can quickly go through each one. So the first year together, they finished 49 and 23. Obviously, this is a shortened season, so they would have been close to a 60-win team. They ended up losing in the conference semifinals to the Nuggets 4-3. They infamously blew a 3-1 lead. Doc Rivers gets fired. They bring in Tyronn Lue. Um, the next season, they go 47 and 25. This is also a shortened season. They make it all the way to the conference finals, but in the conference semifinals, Kawhi Leonard uh, tears his ACL, I think it was. And he misses the rest of the season. Paul George plays great, but they end up losing in 6 in the conference finals to the Suns. 2021, 2022, that is the infamous Bird Night where they lost in the play-in game against the New Orleans Pelicans. They finished just above 500 that season, 42 and 40. Paul George and Kawhi were injured in that year, and that was just filled with injuries that season. The next year, 2022, 2023, they were right above 500 again, 44 and 38, and they lost 4-1 to the Suns. This season was rough because Paul George, Kawhi, they were all playing great. And then Paul George went out with injury. And then after game two, I think it was, of the Sun series, Kawhi gets hurt after the Clippers are able to steal game one. And then last but not least, the last year of Paul George with the Clippers, they finished 51 and 31, uh, 62% winning percentage. They lost in the first round 4-2 to the Dallas Mavericks. So very disappointing run filled with injuries. That last year, Kawhi was injured, obviously. Um, and yeah, it's just sometimes you have to chalk it up to tough luck because honestly, if they got more bites at the apple fully healthy, they could have done something. But the only year they were healthy was that bubble year.
Yeah. Quick question about that. Do you think it was predictable that the Clippers would have been that injury prone? Because I kind of feel like that was some of my thoughts as well when I thought about the deal back then. Like Paul George came off a shoulder injury in the playoffs and wasn't really the same again. Kawhi had a quad injury when he was with the Spurs, and then yeah, had a great run with the Raptors again. But overall, like they were aging. They were in their prime, but it was obvious that they were going to get out of their prime by the end of the contracts. So, what do you guys think?
I think it's always hard to predict injuries because obviously that's a hindsight thing. You always bet on your guys being healthy because that scenario we've been through. Just some Paul George stats. So he played about 263 games in total with the Clippers. I'm not sure if over that 5 year span, I'm not sure if that includes regular season and playoff games, but he did play 38 playoff games over 5 years. Um, but if you can take into account, how long a series can go, that he's been in multiple game sevens with the Clippers. I can think about the Jazz, I can think about the Mavericks twice. If I'm no, just once. So it's yeah, twice. What are we thinking, Skip?
Once. Bubble was 6 games,
Once.
and then there was a game seven. Yeah,
Yep,
I
that
think.
was the season following. So in terms of obviously the money, and one thing I touched on our podcast earlier this week was like the Clippers organization put a lot of money into like a new stadium, fan sections, like it's kind of big money business in LA. And they were counting on this team being successful to grow their fan base, which is massively outgrown by the Lakers, unfortunately. But it's just in terms of value of what we've given up, it's not what you want to see if you're a Clippers fan.
Yeah, it is tough. In terms of injury proneness, I guess you could say, I think, um, yeah, it's tough. I mean, you can make the argument that this was to be expected, some of the injuries, because Kawhi with the Raptors was on fumes towards the end of it, and Paul George with OKC, he kept getting injured at the start of the playoffs as well. So it probably was predictable. Paul George in Philly feels a little bit predictable that injuries might get in the way, but hopefully not. That's all you can say, I guess. A fun fact, Kawhi won more playoff series in 1 year with the Raptors than the 5 years he's done with the Clippers now. He won 4 series, obviously championship with the Raptors, and he's won 3 series with the Clippers so far. So that's funny. And last but not least, shout out to Paul George. He's going to be in serious consideration of statue status in Oklahoma City just for how well he has set up this new Thunder era with like the trade that he helped bring them. With that being said, guys, take care. Like, comment, subscribe, drop your opinions below. Are we crazy? Are we right? Whatever you think, down in the comment section. Thanks.